Pickett, Gary Johnson, and William Well. Time now for questions from the audience. I'd like you both to meet Kimberly Munley. She was one of the responding civilian police officers at Fort Hood. She helped put an end to the mass shooting there that left 13 people dead. She was shot 3 times in exchange of gunfire. Her femoral artery was severed. Her knee was shattered in more than 120 pieces. She's currently the president of Step Up for Soldiers, which is a nonprofit that helps disabled veterans adjust to a post-war environment. She's an independent and she's undecided. Welcome.
Thank you. My question is, since the November 5th, 2009 attack, there have been numerous terrorist attacks since then, both stateside and abroad. And my question is, what is your view on the threat of Islamic terrorism, and how do you plan on keeping our citizens safe and fight the threat while downsizing our military force numbers?
Well, a couple of things is a recent poll came out last week among active military personnel, which I thought was really significant, who they favored to be president of the United States. And Johnson Weld was favored 39%, Trump 31%, and Clinton 20%. So, hey, we are at war with terrorism, and we will do everything we can to protect the United States from that threat. But we're not going to support regime change, believing that our military interventions, when it comes to regime change, has led to the unintended consequence of making things worse, not better.
Well, what about the threat, here at home? Just today, a D.C. transit police officer was charged with helping ISIS. Do you have a plan for dealing with...
No, that's the lone wolf problem. The person, copycat, taking cues from ISIS. And I proposed a 1,000 FBI agent task force, similar to task forces that we had in the Justice Department when I was there under President Reagan. We had one for organized crime called the Organized Crime Strike Forces, and we took out the top 3 echelons of organized crime by concentrating all the knowledge in one place, and tips and hotlines, and you amass the evidence necessary to get either a search warrant or some form of surveillance to make the case to take out the network. And the tragedy in the Omar Mateen case in Orlando at the nightclub was that man had been interrogated twice by the FBI, and when they couldn't make an airtight case on him, they dropped his name from the list, so he disappeared from view. That would not have happened in the days when we were fighting organized crime or even the Enron task force. So that's something very specific you could do that's been done by the Justice Department.
But I've seen you talk about 20% budget reductions across the board of the government. Would that include the FBI? And if it includes the military, to the question, how do you cut a military budget at the same time as...
The Pentagon itself says that we can cut 20% of U.S. bases. That's the Pentagon itself.
That's bases inside the United States.
Yes, and outside...
Which gets into politics, of course.
Well, exactly. Gets into politics. I think that also brings up the topic of term limits, and if term limits existed, I think elected officials would do the right thing as opposed to whatever it takes to get reelected. But big contributing factor for why that's not happening.
But traditionally, libertarians, are not about intervention in foreign lands. If dealing with Syria, dealing with ISIS, doesn't that require boots on the ground?
What I was talking about was purely domestic,
yeah.
Wolf. And you say, wouldn't that be expensive? Yeah. But it's a top national priority to defeat ISIS and its copycatters in this country. So you do a supplemental appropriation for 1,000 FBI agents. Does that cost money? Yeah, it costs money, but you do what you have to do. Abroad, I think... it's a tougher fight. If it's a obvious ISIS training platform in South Yemen, and you have a complacent or willing local government, maybe drones is the way to take that out. If it's isolated people, roaming around in hills and caves in Afghanistan, much less appealing. If it's, as Gary was saying, regime change in Syria or Lebanon, where the people we throw in with turn out to be aligned with ISIS, that's extremely unappealing.
Would you have gone after Osama bin Laden? Would you have made?
Yes, would have gone in after Osama bin Laden, and after 7 months, we defeated Al Qaeda. We should have gotten out. We should have gotten out with the caveat that we'll come back if Osama bin Laden raises his head, and that I think we should get out of Afghanistan now. And as difficult as that will be, the consequences being, you could argue, will be horrible. Those same consequences are going to exist 20 years from now, if that's when we decide to get out, or for some that will just stay there forever.
So even if it means the Taliban coming back, you still say get out of Afghanistan?
Well, the Taliban is there, and I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that hanging around there forever, unless we plan to be there forever. But
yeah, the argument that those 8,400 troops have to stay there proves too much, because the rejoinder is, oh, how long are they supposed to stay there? Forever?
I want you to meet Eddie Moy. He's a marketing manager from Brooklyn. Right now, he's leaning toward voting for Secretary Clinton in November. Welcome, Eddie.
Good evening. My question is, do you think that civilians in the United States should be allowed to purchase and own semi-automatic weapons like AK-47s or AR-15s?
Well, right now, that is a category of weapon that encompasses 30 million weapons, semi-automatic. That's 30 million rifles. So let's just say we passed a law that outlawed semi-automatic rifles. I think you'd have maybe half of those rifles turned in, and the other half would be 15 million of those rifles would be owned by law-abiding citizens that are now going to become criminals. I think it's a misunderstood issue. There are no automatic rifles currently allowed for sale. That went away decades ago.
So no change in the sale of semi-automatics. The AR-15s should still be made available.
Well, AR-15 is a class of weapon of which 30 million, there's 30 million semi-automatic rifles.
So no change.
Right.
Okay. I want to bring in Christopher D'Amato. He's an actor from the Bronx. He's a registered independent. He's voting for you this year.
Good evening, governors. My question is, the most frequent argument I come across when telling people about you is that a vote for a third-party candidate is a wasted vote, or even worse, a helpful vote for either Trump or Hillary. So what is your response to the idea that a vote for a third-party candidate is a wasted vote or helpful to one of the two major party candidates, and why is a vote for your ticket not a wasted vote?
Well, a wasted vote is voting for somebody that you don't believe in. And if we're going to continue to vote for the lesser of two evils, that's still evil.
Governor Weld?
Well, as Gary likes to say, we have no problem with people casting a wasted vote. If we get in the debates, we're going to win this whole thing. If you want to waste your vote on Trump or Clinton, be our guest.
But I mean, you both talked about your displeasure with the Trump campaign. If at the end of the day, you pull away enough Clinton votes to actually give the presidency to Donald Trump, would that be okay with you, Governor?
At this point, that's pure speculation. And, we believe in ourselves and our ticket, and we're voting Libertarian.
I want you to meet Jennifer Pelton. She's a lawyer, registered Republican from Westchester County. She says she leans Libertarian. She likes you. She's still not sure if she's even going to make it to the polls in November. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you for being here. I would like to ask both of you, who has been the biggest inspiration for your views, and how has this person influenced you?
Well, I've got a lot of role models. My role models are those that have been successful in business. I was really disillusioned when it came to politics, having never been involved in politics before. I found out that my supposed role models weren't necessarily role models. They were individuals more concerned about getting reelected than not getting reelected. So Thomas Jefferson, though, in the category of role models, here was somebody who was genuinely humble in the office, and that's something that I also pledge, is to bring an end to the imperial presidency. We'll be great stewards at the office, but we're not getting elected king and dictator here.
Governor Weld?
I was going to say Thomas Jefferson as well, because of the restraint with which he approached government. He said that government is best which governs least, and the sum of good government is to restrain men from injuring one another. And he was not somebody out to stake a big empire for himself. Quite the contrary. I wrote a piece for the newspapers not long ago saying that Gary Johnson and Bill Weld are just a pair of classic 19th century Jeffersonian liberals, which is what I think our political pedigree really is.
Our next question is from J.C. Cooper. As far as I know, no relation to me. She's a law office assistant from Monroe, Connecticut, and she says she's currently undecided.
Thank you for having me here tonight. My question is, the next president will most likely need to appoint a few Supreme Court justices. could you elaborate on the type of judicial philosophy you would like to see in the next justice?
Well, that there wouldn't be a litmus test, and that you would look at a judge, a potential judge, as looking at the Constitution from the standpoint of original intent. So really, looking and following through with the U.S. Constitution. Bill's got some opinions on this also.
Yeah, I mean, Governor Weld, you're a former prosecutor. Do you have a model? Is there a...
No, I don't have a model. I'd look for the best legal minds I could find, and the whole person. Two of my idols on the court were Hugo Black and Bill Douglas, W.O. Douglas, who you wouldn't have thought that they'd be great justices when they got there, but they were broad gauge people who saw the whole picture, and they dissented in an awful lot of cases where 7-2 votes against them, and they said, no, this shall not stand. This is not the right thing to do, and a lot of their dissents have been borne out in history. But there are...
Is there somebody on the current court that you admire?
I'd almost rather not pick current names out of the hat. I loved Black and Douglas and John Marshall Harlan and Frankfurter for different types of cases.
Okay. Our next question is from Ellis Jeter. He lives in New York City. Hasn't decided whether he's voting for you or for Secretary Clinton. Welcome.
Hello. In my sophomore year of college, I was employed at the private religious university that I was attending when an anonymous person outed me to the school administration and my employer. And on the grounds of religious opposition to homosexuality, I both lost my job and was evicted from my...
This is CNN Breaking News.